Howdy.
Estuardo, so good to see you today. I want to start by expressing my extreme gratitude for today. Got a nice bike ride. I'm sitting outside, beautiful sunny Colorado day, looking at Green Mountain, where I'm sorry, Green Mountain's that way. I'm looking at Bear Creek, and dude, got an amazing ride in this morning. Absolutely gorgeous. We are blessed, my friend. We are blessed.
Yeah, man. Um, I'm in my basement with no windows, no view, but I'm still very thankful and grateful for what we have.
You sound like a victim. You sound like a victim. And, we want to talk today about this idea that I read recently in this really good book called The Big Leap. And for those that have read it, this may sound familiar, but basically, in a nutshell, uh, Gay Hendricks he just talks about all the ways that we effectively don't live in our zone of genius, and he talks about this idea of the upper limit problem and how we oftentimes will, if our businesses are thriving, our relationships are thriving, we'll do something to sabotage them because we start to get uncomfortable when we reach our upper limits of what we are comfortable with. We get uncomfortable, and then we'll do something to effectively sabotage it and bring us back down into our zone of comfort or our zone of excellence versus our zone of genius. And what I love about it is it goes beyond just like uh, you know, um, performance or your businesses. It goes directly into relationships. And I read this section that he talks about. One of the ways we do it in our relationships or in relationships in general is squabbling. We squabble, and I don't know why. You and I talked previously about, especially in marriage or in our relationships too, there's this scale of 100%. And oftentimes, I give 50, you give 50, we meet in the middle. And the ideal is that we both do 100. And for some reason, that word picture didn't make as big of an impact. But this one, as I read it, he says that oftentimes in arguments, we're in a race to victimhood. And we are in a race to see who's the biggest victim. And most of our squabbles, we see this 100% line, the scale. And as long as I'm 51% of the victim and being wronged, then I'm in a validated, justified position, right? To have my grievances heard and acknowledged, and ultimately to drive you to change. And I'm just curious, have you being a bigger victim, has that ever caused your wife to be like, oh my gosh, Stu, you're so right, like I'm gonna change these things about myself?
Um, I don't think that's ever happened. No. That
No,
yeah,
has that happened? Oh,
it's not happened. Um, I
yeah.
I was thinking about it from a parenting perspective actually this morning. My son was he was cranky, he didn't sleep well, and he didn't get something he wanted. I can't remember what it was, but he just started like throwing a tantrum and, you know, went into kind of the victim mentality and started throwing a fit and screaming. I was just like, dude, does your screaming and yelling and tantrum like make you feel better? I was like, because it's not going to solve the problem. Like, do you just want me to feel sorry for you? And he's like, yeah, it makes me feel better. And I'm thinking through that, like, huh, as a 43-year-old, it probably hasn't changed much between 5 years old and 43 years old, like I'm the victim, feel sorry for me, throw a tantrum, you know? Um, I wonder why and how we got it wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to read a couple just sections of this, but he Gay Hendricks talks about, he says, in nearly 5,000 sessions of assisting people in resolving conflicts, I have never ever witnessed the following exchange. And he says, person A, why are you making me so miserable? This problem is entirely your fault. Person B, wow, thank you for pointing that out. I agree completely. It's clear that I'm the perpetrator, you're the victim, and your misery is entirely my fault. He says,
Yeah.
I've never ever seen that. He said, but I have seen about 5,000 variations of the following. Person A, why are you making me so miserable? This problem is entirely your fault. Person B, I'm making you miserable. I'm the one who's the victim here. It's your fault, not mine. I've been putting up with your gut for so long. I had to have some some sort of martyrdom prize. Person A, that's absurd. Let me tell you all the reasons I'm the victim. Person B, great. When you're through, I'll tell you how all those ways are your fault. It's just so funny because, as you look at this, and I'll tell you to kind of to wrap this up and show the solution, right? Like, yeah, we can always highlight these different ways and we can acknowledge. And what I would encourage all of our listeners, just acknowledge the ways you do this, right? Like, we oftentimes, you and I joke a lot about like, oh, hey, my invitation must have been lost to your kid's birthday party. I'm still waiting to receive it because you didn't invite me. And like, but there's truth in jest, right? Like sometimes, and I asked you the other day, because that did happen to us, and I did not invite you to my youngest birthday. But I did come up to you on Monday and I was like, hey, dude, were you really upset about that? Because I just want to explain, like, this kid he's just a different kid. And you're like, no, dude, I really don't care. But ultimately, that's not a far stretch. I hear people talking. I hear these people talking about. I was just talking to a guy about this conflict, and they could cite where these two brothers said something to each other that caused an insult, and they haven't spoken for decades because of this comment, right? And I'm just like, man, that's fascinating, and that's not unusual. And you see it with I talked to my daughter the other day. She did sin. She said something, and I said, hey, honey, we have an opportunity here. Are we going to be the type of daughter, father who are going to have a very deep relationship and go forward? And not that we're never going to get frustrated, but are we going to talk about things together? Is that a relationship that you desire, or is it this desire, or do you want to have a relationship of like, oh, my dad's so mean and I don't talk to him, and you talk behind my back to your friends, and I'm like, oh, my daughter, she's such a brat, and like, is that the relationship we want to have? But I voiced it because ultimately you don't desire that, and you can do something about it. And as a dad, just to being honest, I have worn the victim role with my kids. I'm like, fine, I'm such a bad dad. You go find a better dad. Like, I've said things, and I'll tell you this word picture I'm about to give you changed, has really, the last few weeks, really changed the way I talk to my wife, and not talk to her because of anything she's done. It's because I'm recognizing this profound truth, and it's driving a lot of the conversations I'm having to be different, right? And the way I look at my friendships differently, the way I look at my being a dad different. And he says, he talks about understanding the physics of arguments, and whether you're talking about a couple, you're talking about board members, countries, or religious groups, you have to understand the physics of an argument. And typically, he says the only way that he's ever found that you resolve conflicts is that each entity in a situation represents 100%, right? 100%. And so we each have 100% of the responsibility for resolving the conflict. And I love that language. We each are 100% responsible for resolving the conflict. That one line is what really changed my entire thought, because it took out the negative conversation of being a victim, right? Like, that's kind of negative in nature. Like, I'll stop being a victim. And it took away some of that language, but it really, the power that it gives to say, I am 100% responsible for solving this conflict, or resolving this conflict. I'm sorry. Like, that changed everything for me. And I'm just curious, like, how does that make you feel, right? Like, does it empower you? Like, what does that make you think about?
Yeah, man. I mean, it makes me think that someone actually, really cares for solving the problem, and not so much worried about, just like tit for tat, right? Um, it makes me think of one individual who did just that for all of us. Um, Took that 100% role, and that was Jesus. Like, he took it all. He took all responsibility and solved everybody's sin problem. Um, and still shows up and cares about us, and uh, you know, doesn't do this tit for tat, like, oh, you did this, so yeah, I'm not gonna forgive you on this one, and I'm gonna remember you for this, right? Like, no, he took it all. He's 100% in all the time. So like how can we align more in that role to show up differently for, the relationships in our life?
I love that dude. I actually didn't consider that from the faith perspective, but I absolutely love that. And it's so true, right? That's the ideal. And if we're trying to live our lives to be more Christ-like, I mean, that's a beautiful example of that, right? Like that's a beautiful example of how we can conduct ourselves and how we can look at our friends, our families, those we interact with, our these conflicts that we have. And I just I love the idea. He goes on to say, if two people are involved, there's 200% responsibility to be divided up.
Yeah.
200% responsibility to be divided up. And this approach requires that each of us takes some portion of 100%, right? We take 100% responsibility for it. And it was pretty fascinating. He says it's a massive problem to excuse me, it's a massive thinking error that causes massive problems because it leads to endless jockeying for the victim position. And so I would just offer to our listeners that just to change your mindset, right? To change your mindset and to consider in these relationships, in these conversations, and whether it's professional, personal, it's in your house, it's in your place of business. Are you willing to take 100% responsibility for resolving conflict? Do you care enough about the person? And then there's the irony of it is, if you do take this level of responsibility, inevitably your life is going to have more joy. You're going to be happy. You're going to show up different. You're going to show up better. And it benefits you equally as much, but it also is very empowering. Like there's nothing as unempowering as being a victim, just by definition, right? There's nothing that takes your power away by being a victim. And here's the crazy part about it is, typically we choose and often relish the victim position.
Yeah, dude.
Think about that.
Yeah. Like,
You want to be in all reality, when you say it logically, nobody wants to be a victim of anything. You don't want to be a victim of a crime. You don't want to be a victim of something bad. But yet, when you go into a conflict, you seek to be the biggest victim. There's a big disconnect there.
right, man. Like, I mean, just think about those words. Jockeying to be in the victim position. Like you're trying you're trying harder to prove the point that you're more of the victim. Like that just sounds ridiculous when you like hear those words come out, right? But so often that's what we're trying to do. Like it doesn't make any sense. We should stop
It
doing that.
doesn't, and it's truly not desirable, right? It's truly not
Yeah.
desirable. But the reason we find ourselves in these positions is because we don't give the requisite amount of time, effort, and commitment to thinking these things through and to saying these things, right? Like oftentimes that kind of thought process is enabled when you step back and you count to 10. Like that's why I find it's so effective. Take a deep breath and count to 10, because when you do that, you give yourself the time and the space to actually consider the things that you're doing. And then it also gives you the opportunity to retake power and be like, do I really want this for my life? Do I really desire this outcome for my life? And if I don't, can I do something about it? And oftentimes the answer is yes. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And what's crazy about it, dude, is it's not that hard. For
It's not.
me, I'll tell you, since I read that, no joke, since I read this, I have been way happier at home because the way I'm showing up is very different, and it's because I'm challenging myself in a different way. I'm taking the time to deliberately consider how I want to show up, and then I'm showing up that way. Whether you walk into a room with a smile, whether I walk by my wife and I say something, or I compliment, or I joke, or I laugh, or I say nothing. That's in my control, dude. And when you say nothing and you offer coldness or whatever, or even just attachment or distraction, when you offer that, well, it has an impact. And you are always going to have an impact. I believe that especially, anybody listening to this podcast, whoever you are, you have an impact. You have the power to make an impact on somebody, good or bad, right? Good or bad. And oftentimes it just can be a word of encouragement. Dude, the way I call these super annoying service lines, cell phone companies is very different now. I ask them their name and I repeat their name and I'm like, before we start, can I just ask you how you're doing today? And I mentioned that before, but now it's so intentional because I want to make an impact in every single conversation and interaction I have. And I want it to be positive. It doesn't have to be earth shaking. I just want it to be positive. And I can do the exact same thing in my house, dude. There's been more laughter in my house since I read that. No, I mean, no joke. I'm not even exaggerating this. The way that I've interacted with my daughter and just like the laughter, like yesterday we laughed for like 30 minutes. I finally was like, okay, we need to just stop because like now you're starting to annoy me because she's being super like animated and playful and we're singing and doing all kinds of fun stuff. But it really boiled down to the attitude when she walked in the door. It started because I walked up to her and I was like, how was your day? And I hugged her and I grabbed her. She's like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just loving you. I'm just loving you. And she's like, okay, can you stop loving me now? I'm like, nope, can't do it.
Nope,
Can't stop,
can't
won't
stop
stop.
loving you. Not
And
gonna
so it's
happen.
just it's just that little stuff, man. It's just that
Yeah.
little stuff that we have complete power over. And what are we doing about it?
Stop being a victim. I love it.
Stop being a victim. It's no fun, dude. It's no fun. It's no fun.
It's not. Good word today, my man.
Yeah, buddy. Read more. Challenge your thinking. Put it into action. Be different. Be better. Be kinetic. Love you.
Love you. See you.